Alright everybody, 2025 is over, so I thought, why not share my thoughts on this year's anime lineup and expose myself to public judgment while at it. Seriously now, 2025 was actually a pretty good year for anime. There were a lot of solid shows, and I also made a conscious effort to diversify my tastes, different genres, different vibes, which made the watch list more interesting, even if none of these quite made it into my personal all-time favorites list. For this tier list, I only included series where I watched at least half the season. That's why even the lowest tier here is still considered watchable. Usually, if I don't find anything to connect with after the first 3 or 4 episodes, I drop a show completely, so those didn't make the list at all. You might notice a few very notable titles missing. I'll address those omissions at the end of the video. And finally, while I explain why each series landed where it did, this is still very much a subjective list. This is based on my own tastes, biases and vibes, not a definitive ranking of anime quality. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. First one on the list, the Medalist. This follows a figure skating coach whose own dreams of success were cut short by a late start in the competitive world of skating, and his shy, young student who dreams of skating seriously despite starting late. It's a pretty earnest story with an understanding of people's passions, fears and regrets. Rather than focusing on flashy victories, the story centers on perseverance, emotional growth, and what it means to keep reaching for a dream even when the odds are stacked against you. I particularly like how the anime treats even its minor characters with nuance and understanding, like for example the conflict involving the protective but well-intentioned mother, who's trying to shield her daughter from possible disillusionment. One can't help but sympathize with her, while still very much wanting Inori to be allowed to flourish on her terms. All in all, this was one of the year's greats in my book. If you're interested, look out for season 2, it's about to come out this January. Okay, next up, CTD animation. This is a sketch-based story that is more slice of life, but if life had funny Inori that were all a bit goofy. It comes from the same mind as Nichijou, so if you like that, chances are this will also be your thing. Though it does take about 2 or 3 episodes to really get a feel for the characters. While the little stories might not seem relatable on a superficial viewing, or even related, the characters' lives do end up intertwining, often in unexpected ways, and some of the gags can hit certain familiar beats. Like, who hasn't looked at clothing prices in a boutique and wondered if space-time itself just broke? Or bet on a winning horse only for the horse to turn out to be a gazelle, metaphorically speaking. Also, it's done by Kyoto Animation, which is a pretty big plus on its own. Highlight moment for me, 2 girls debating how to bring about world peace, and reaching a surprisingly reasonable conclusion. Well, I'll just add this to the great pile as well. Witch Watch. This is the story of a young witch and her stoic childhood friend / ogre who ends up becoming her familiar and reluctantly moving in to protect her. It's the well-known trope of the clumsy heroine constantly getting into trouble, usually at the expense of the male lead. The comedy in this can be a bit hit or miss, with some episodes feeling particularly stale. There seems to be a lack of focus when it comes to the actual plot, and the characters could use a bit more development. But the gags, when they do land, can be straight fun, and the story is pretty honest in not taking itself seriously. At one point, the narration straight up roasts common manga tropes by describing an in-universe hit series as, and this is more or less a direct quote, a battle fantasy manga about sword-wielding high school boys who defeat monsters. It has vague world-building, cool-sounding dialogue, obscure plot development, and an overall poorly defined structure. End quote. So yeah, they know what they're doing. I think it's watchable overall. Alright, next up, Clevatess. This is a dark fantasy set in a world where humanity, and other fantasy races, live confined within territory surrounded by armies of so-called dark beasts. Clevatess is one of those dark beast lords, and thanks to a mix of capriciousness and a little plot convenience, he ends up adopting a human baby, for lack of a better description. The story plays with moral ambiguity, even asks the question of whether mankind's desire to expand its horizon is worth the cost or is even legitimate, and it can get truly dark at times. Content warning for sexual assault themes. Unfortunately, I felt it failed to delve into its more compelling themes enough to deliver a satisfying story so far. We get some fairly generic villains, and Clevatess himself seems to become a less interesting character the moment he takes on a more human-like form. Still an enjoyable watch, and despite its many flaws, I'll give it some credit, because I'm a sucker for dark fantasy stories. Dandadan Season 2. Now, Dandadan is popular enough that it probably doesn't need much of an introduction. I will say, though, that I wasn't quite as big of a fan of the first season as everyone else seemed to be. Now, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed the heck out of it, I just didn't feel there was enough cohesion in all the chaos for me to totally love it. But with the new season, I started seeing the story differently. I won't get into it too much here since I already made a whole video about it. You can check that one out if you're curious. Suffice it to say, this was one of the year's greats for me. The next one here is Gachiakuta. I hope I'm saying that right. This one starts out looking like another not particularly creative story about class divide, but that impression changes quickly as the protagonist is thrown out, along with the trash, into the much more colorful, both literally and figuratively, world of the pit. One of its basic premises, the ability of certain people to imbue cherished personal objects with a sort of soul, effectively turning them into weapons, makes for an interesting power system. The artistic direction for this, with the graffiti aesthetic, is amongst my favorite of the year, as is the first opening song from Pale Dusk. Unfortunately, the story does tend to meander, with strong emotional moments and exciting fights mixed in with more generic plot points and familiar shonen tropes. Some hit the mark, some don't. The cast of characters is large and colorful, but it could definitely use more development, especially since the potential is definitely there, and I loved Zanka. Overall, I'm invested in seeing how this plays out. There's enough here with the underlying social commentary and all that raw anger and momentum to build something impactful. It definitely intrigued me enough to pick up the manga, so I'm gonna put it in good with love vibes. The summer Hikaru died. This one follows Yoshiki, a teenage boy who realizes that his best friend Hikaru, who went missing in the mountains, came back as something else, something not quite human. More than horror, the story is psychological, focusing on Yoshiki's actions from the perspective of a lonely young boy living amongst people who don't see him, and whose prejudice would never truly accept the real him. There is also an overarching supernatural mystery involving the villagers and the mountain legendary spirit that raises a few interesting questions. This was one of the more atmospheric shows of the year, with moments of emotional intimacy often crossed with unsettling or uneasy scenes. And there is a sense of slow, creeping existential horror from witnessing the faux Hikaru trying to make sense of his own being. Overall, this was one of 2025's favorites for me, and it even got me into picking up the manga, so I'm gonna put it in standout. Next up, and Shirley. This is a new adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, focusing on imagination, identity, and growing up and staying true to oneself. I found the story to be faithful to its source material's emotional core, with Anne's pure joy and enthusiasm being appropriately infectious. Just like in the novels, rather than relying on high drama, the series focuses on small moments, personal growth, and the way imagination can be both the shield and the source of strength. It's a gentle character-driven story about learning when and with who you belong. That being said, I found myself no longer feeling my usual nostalgia for the story of Anne of Green Gables, which is why this will only make it a good tier. Okay, next up, Apocalypse Hotel, or What If Customer Service Survives the End of Humanity? Set in a world where humanity is either dead or escaped in space, this story follows the robot staff of a high-end hotel while they maintain routines and uphold hospitality long after it has any practical purpose. It blends absurdity and melancholy, reflecting on how the spirit of things can persevere long after they're gone. The story allows for some very interesting situations, such as revisiting laws in a new world with different species, because yes, there are aliens involved. The deadpan humor blends perfectly with its melancholic tone, though I suppose it can be a bit of an acquired taste. For me at least, it was one of my favorites of this year. I think I'm gonna put it in standout. Tatsuki Fujimoto 1726. This is an anthology-style anime adaptation of some of Fujimoto's of Chainsaw Man one-shots, drawn when he was between the ages of 17 and 26. You have all the hallmarks of classic Fujimoto here. Unconventional, sometimes a bit over the top, but ultimately usually making a point. Each story explores raw, often uncomfortable emotions, like love, loneliness, violence, regret. The tonal shifts can feel very abrupt, and you can clearly see Fujimoto's fascination with human connection in its messiest forms. It's pretty experimental, and the quality of the individual stories is pretty uneven, but I personally love that, so I'm gonna put it in great. To Be Hero X. Technically a donghua, I know, but I'll add it here nonetheless. It's going to be the only one, didn't get a chance to watch Lord of Mysteries, for example. Anyway, this is set in a world where superheroes' power is directly tied to public perception and popularity. As rankings shift and reputations rise or fall, heroism becomes less about morality and more about image, branding, and mass approval. It's a pretty sharp critique of influencer culture and of systems based on public perception, packaged as several individual stories that build upon and complete each other and converge to a pretty exciting finale. It's probably the one I'm most excited for as season 2. If you're like me and aren't a fan of the 3D animation, though that's just an individual preference, it does mostly completely switch to 2D by episode 8. Though interesting enough, they managed to incorporate these switches into the story in a pretty intelligent way. If there's one I highly recommend from this year, it's this one. It's a clear favorite of mine. And now we get to the season 2 of the Apothecary Diaries. Basically, Momo continues solving palace mysteries while navigating politics, poison, and extremely annoying men. I really love the political complexities this season, and for more details on that, I made a video that you can check out, link below. I will say though, the Apothecary Diaries is one of those stories where I love the whole, and I am up to date with the light novels, more than I love the individual parts, where I often find myself finding flaws. For example, the antagonist's motivations and their overall plan felt somewhat contrived, but it's clear this particular plot point was more of a tool used to expose the underlying political and societal flaws. So yeah, still love it, still great. The fragrant flower blooms with dignity. This is probably one that's going to get me some hate. A romance set around two high school students from very different social worlds, it's a show I didn't end up liking quite as much as everyone else did. While it's exactly as sweet and wholesome as advertised, there wasn't much that initially clicked for me. Until what particular scene that is. There's a simple flashback explaining how Rintaro, the male lead, first dyed his hair, and the detail that really got to me is his mother choosing to dye her own hair as well, just thus he wouldn't feel excluded. It's a small moment, but for personal reasons, it hit harder than anything else in the anime. And that's when it clicked for me. If you're someone who connects deeply with these quiet, personal gestures, this show will absolutely give you those warm, fuzzy feelings like nothing else. Anyway, it was good, I'll give it that, just didn't vibe as much with it. Next up is Secrets of the Silent Witch. The story of a powerful witch who can cast magic without incantations, mostly because her crippling social anxiety makes her almost completely unable to speak in public. She's tasked with secretly protecting a young noble at a magic academy, and the story focuses on her life at the school, where she ended up unraveling several mysteries that, for me at least, ended up not feeling very mysterious. Monica is a sweet character, and I particularly enjoyed the detail about her being a math enthusiast. Yes, mathematics. Visually, this looks good, with a fairy tale-like aesthetic to it, but the overall story felt pretty low stakes for me, and the handling of her trauma, while not bad, I felt had nothing I haven't seen before from this kind of story. I'm going to keep it as watchable. Next up, Season 2 of Toilet-Bound Hanako-kun. This is the anime where rumors of supernatural phenomena blur the lines between urban legend and reality. I feel this season was a net improvement over the previous one, with a clearly darker tone and less episodic formula. Emotional stakes increase significantly, and the story places greater emphasis on consequences, identity, and sacrifice. I like that the art style for this one is more visually distinct, and that we got a chance to see more of Hanako's darker side, but also some of his more human side. Also, big fan of seeing Mitsuba and Ko interact. Overall, I liked it a lot, so I'm gonna put it in good. This one is Kowloon generic romance. Set in a fictional version of Hong Kong's former Kowloon walled city, this is a sci-fi romance that feels slightly, well, off. In fact, if you expect a romance in the more traditional sense, you'll probably be disappointed. Two co-workers drift closer together, but reality itself is unstable and not really what it seems. It's less about love stories and more about memory, identity, and stagnation. Basically, a mystery story with an existential side. The visuals are heavy on nostalgia feels that work really well with the story. I will say that by the end, some threads relating to certain side characters do seem to be left only half explored, and the conclusion probably won't satisfy someone looking for more of a hard sci-fi. But it does serve its existential themes, and it is the kind of story I want more of, so I'm gonna put it in great. Spy Family Season 3. We're back with our familiar story about espionage, found family, and domestic chaos. The series doubles down on charm rather than escalation, though I did enjoy the Bass kidnapping plot and its more political undertones. It has strong production quality, and Anya is as cute as always. That being said, I have to admit I'm getting a bit tired with the overall stagnant plot and low narrative stakes. If this were the first season, I would say I love it, but as it is, it's starting to feel too safe and repetitive, and I'm vibing with it less than before. Next up we have Gnosia. Based on a visual novel social deduction RPG, Gnosia traps its cast in a time loop when one or more of them might be an inhuman imposter. Each cycle reveals fragments of character backstories, and at times the anime leans into existential dread rather than pure mystery. It's basically Among Us, the movie, but with everyone needing therapy. While it can be fun to follow the deductions used to suss out the Gnosia, and the ship's ever-changing rules, the show still ends up getting a bit repetitive, and at one point, I felt the reasons given for the continuing cycle to be a bit contrived. All in all, a decent sci-fi show, though nothing groundbreaking. The next one is a less popular one, Cocoon. An anime movie set during World War II, Cocoon follows a group of Okinawan schoolgirls drafted into war efforts. It is based on the real story of the Himeyuri students, and if you're not already familiar with it, I highly recommend you look it up. It is a truly heartbreaking account. The film presents an intimate portrayal of youth confronted with meaningless violence, and the metaphor of the cocoon as a protective shell from the outside world works really well. What didn't work as well for me was, the 1 hour length felt too little for the heavy subject matter, and certain changes from the manga were not to my liking. I do recommend also reading the manga. It is only 15 chapters long and was recently licensed by Viz. The movie itself, I'll rate it as good but flawed. Takopi's Original Sin. A cheerful alien arrives on Earth hoping to spread happiness, only to encounter cruelty, abuse, and emotional neglect. I already went into detail about this show and its themes in one of my videos. Check it out if you have the time and are interested. This one was extremely depressing, but great nonetheless. Let's move on to Lazarus. This one takes place in a world where a miracle pain relief drug threatens humanity with delayed extinction. A task force of people from various backgrounds is assembled in order to locate its creator and the saving antidote before time runs out. Being a Shinichiro Watanabe work, expectations were, of course, high. And yeah, out of all of the Watanabe-directed series I've seen so far, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, Space Dandy, and Kids on the Slope, this was the weakest. Despite attempts at more philosophical questions about responsibility and salvation, the story feels rushed and too conveniently wrapped up. There are several plotlines that feel go nowhere, and there isn't enough development for us to truly care about its characters. It definitely would have needed more than its 14 episodes run to reach its potential. It is still a visually stylish show, and the action is good, with heavy reliance on vibes. I had initially rated this lower, but I feel I might have been a bit biased because of the expectations involved, so I'm going to overcompensate a bit and put it in good this time. Next up, we have Season 2 of Grand Blue. Season 2 continues Yori's college life, which technically involves diving, but is mostly an excuse for alcohol and terrible life decisions. The story leans even harder into its young and dumb routine, which leads to increasingly unhinged situations. Between nudity, drinking, and stupidity, there are still moments of genuine friendship and warmth, and I must admit, this is the college life version that is closer to my own experience, more so than the more wholesome ones. That being said, I could do with less of Kohei's more problematic traits. Still, it managed to keep on making me laugh, so I'm probably still sticking around for Season 3, and I think it's pretty good. Chainsaw Man the movie Reze Arc. Chainsaw Man is no introduction at this point. As a bit of background, while I did enjoy the first season, it hadn't left me as impressed as everyone else. It did intrigue me enough to pick up the manga, and that's what turned me into a fan, despite having its own highs and lows. In Reze Arc, we are fully into the highs, with the movie perfectly capturing Fujimoto's blend of crazy, ridiculous violence that makes way to reveal moments of insightful introspection. The visuals in this are gorgeous, and the direction should also be praised for perfectly capturing the emotion of individual scenes, from awkward sweetness into betrayal, violence, and emotional devastation. Yeah, in case it wasn't obvious, I think it was awesome. Season 2 of My Dress Up Darling. Season 2 continues Marine and Gojo's relationship as cosplay becomes more ambitious and emotionally loaded. It was nice seeing Gojo having some personal growth and addressing some of his own insecurities. It was especially lovely seeing the cosplay world portrayed as a world easily accepting of the so-called weirdos. The frequent miscommunication, misunderstanding tropes can be a bit tiring, but this show's strength for me has always lied in the love it shows to creativity and craftsmanship. Still a good one in my book. Rocky's the Lady's Modesty is the next one. Set in an elite girls' academy, the story follows refined young women who secretly vent their emotions through aggressive rock music. It is first and foremost a story about hiding who you are in order to be accepted in a world with superficial values. In this context, the music becomes rebellion. The series uses musical performance and just straight up talking smack to each other as an emotional release valve. It's loud feelings trapped inside polite bodies. As a minus, I would have liked that the story to address more the mother's role in pushing the main character towards needing to hide her true self. But even without that, the themes hold a special place in my heart, so I'm marking it as great. Sakamoto Days, or John Wick if you worked retail. And this, a once legendary hitman, Sakamoto, has retired and started a family until, predictably, his past refuses to leave him alone. Despite his dad-bod appearance, he's still ridiculously competent, and despite his monotone personality, he manages to attract around him a ragtag team of supporting characters from dubious backgrounds. Now, despite its premise, the story is not as lively or as hilarious as one would expect. It is filled with decent action moments and fan-family moments, but it struggles to find a good balance between the two. Overall, good, but definitely could and should have been better. To Your Eternity Season 3. To Your Eternity follows an immortal being that begins life as a blank slate, gradually learning what it means to be human by forming bonds with people across different eras. Season 3 continues Fushi's long journey, but goes into the present day, where the story kinda loses its fairy tale-like feel for me. The new direction the plot is going makes it feel like a totally different story than the one it was in Season 1, and I'm not sure its themes about time and humanity can hit quite as hard. The introduction of a creepy character obsessed with his child's stepsister really doesn't help at all. Still highly recommend Season 1 for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but this one for me was watchable at best. Moving on to the next one, we have Milky Subway, the Galactic Limited Express. This one truly feels different. A couple of delinquents living in a sci-fi futuristic world are sent to clean the Milky Subway, an old interplanetary train, as part of their community service sentence. And as they get aboard, chaos ensues. Don't expect detailed world building from this, it is, after all, a short 12 3 to 4 minute episode show. What's remarkable about it is how it manages, in its short run, to actually give us enough info about its characters to actually care for them. That and its dry humor made it the best comedic show of the year for me. And if there's anything you live with after watching this, please remember to thank your service workers. In the meantime, I'm putting it in great. The next one is May I Ask for One Final Thing. After being publicly discarded by her fiancé, a noble woman calmly asks for one final thing before leaving, then proceeds to dismantle the entire social order around her with her fists. This was the female power fantasy of the year, and quite funny at times as well. The interactions with the eternally worried brother and the teasing prince were also fun to watch. Now, don't expect a complex narrative out of this. The politics and the intrigue with the goddesses are pretty generic, but you're probably not here for those anyway. You're probably here to see a beautiful woman beating up slavers without breaking a sweat. Anyway, I'm putting this in good, purely on personal vibes. The next one is Sanda. The story of a young boy who turns into Santa Claus. This anime, made by Science Saru, shows you just how crazy it is from the first scene. But don't let that fool you. More than anything else, this is a story about a society that values youth more than it values its children. And about the internal struggles of children faced with the prospect of becoming adults themselves. It balances dark humor with social commentary quite well, even though the pacing can be uneven and its themes don't always come together as well as could be expected. This is another one I have high hopes for if it continues. For now, I will mark it as good. Windbreaker Season 2. Windbreaker is a delinquent action series centered on street fights, rival gangs, and the search for belonging. Season 2 has a few more personal moments, but overall, its plot feels less cohesive, and it still failed to give much development to some of its more important secondary characters. Still, there is a strong sense of brotherhood there, and if you like seeing cute guys with complicated emotions fighting it out while learning to rely on each other, this will hit the spot well enough. I'll rate it as good, with some reservations. And finally, we have Pass the Monster Meet Milady. This is the story of a young noble woman, judged by her peers for her peculiar culinary pursuits, and her ability to appreciate fantasy creatures, especially medium rare, with a sprinkle of pepper. There is an ongoing plot point about the research into how to bring this type of cooking to the entirety of the kingdom's population in order to stave out hunger. However, I'm afraid this is where the story fooled me. See, I mistakenly went in expecting something more on the lines of Delicious in Dungeon. However, this ends up being more of a romance story than anything else, and the other parts of the plot become repetitive or less explored. It's cute and watchable, but that was about it for me. And that about wraps it up. As you might have noticed, Solo Leveling Season 2 wasn't here, mostly because I wasn't that into Season 1 to begin with. Neither was the last season of My Hero Academia. This one I dropped a while ago, at around Season 4, but I am thinking of picking it back up eventually. Uma Musume Cinderella Grey, I started late into the year, so I'm only 4 episodes in right now. Now for my own personal taste, the two big ones missing are Kingdom Season 6 and Ginpachi Sensei. And I say these are the big misses because I am a big fan of both Kingdom and Gintama. That being said, I haven't watched the Kingdom anime, I'm just following the manga, mostly because I tried season 1 and the animation kinda put me off. I know it gets better later on, so I will probably pick it up eventually, I hope. As for Ginpachi-sensei, well, let's just say that a spin-off just isn't something that gets me excited right now. So yeah, anyway, overall, a solid year for anime. A lot of good shows, a lot of interesting ideas, and even the ones that didn't fully click for me were still very watchable, of the ones in the list. As always, this is just my very subjective ranking, so if your favorite landed lower than expected, please tell me in the comments. I do appreciate the engagement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.